Hi guys, and welcome to U-Wrench. Today we're back working on the Grand Caravan. This applies to the 2008 right through to 2021 model. Also applies to the Chyrsler Town and Country. And what we're going to be doing in this video is going to be showing you how to do a complete front strut replacement. Let's get it done. So first step, of course, is to get this wheel removed. Now what you want to do before you jack your car up, you want to slacken these bolts off, literally just by kind of half a turn each. Now the reason being is if you wait until after you've jacked the car up and this wheel is in the air, then when you try and turn these wheel nuts, you'll find that the whole wheel will want to turn. Whereas if you leave it on the ground with the weight still on the wheel, then what you can do is you can just crack these nuts off, half a turn, and repeat that for all 5, and then jack it up, and then we'll get the wheel removed. If you have an impact gun, of course, you can just skip that first step, jack it up and remove the wheel straight away. I'm going to be using an impact gun from here on in just for the sake of kind of speed or ease. But now you've jacked it up just off the floor, just an inch or so, you can zip this wheel off and then we'll carry on lifting it up to the working height. It's a good idea to get some penetration spray onto some of these fixings that we're going to be removing in a short while. We're using Plus Gas, obviously there's hundreds of different ones, liquid wrench and all sorts. Even WD-40 would do a decent job of this. But what that will do, you put a bit of this penetration fluid onto it, and what it will do is actually start to work itself into the threads and start to hopefully ease those out when it comes to removal. It's well worth doing. Sometimes this can be the difference between getting stuck on a bolt for 10 minutes and getting it off nice and smoothly, so well worth the couple of minutes extra work. So we've got the speed sensor bracket, put a little bit on there, and these 2 main bolts for the actual strut here, going to give these a good soaking as well on both sides. And for your stabilizer arm, a bit more penetration spray there as well. So first of all, we've got this little bracket here for the wheel speed sensor. We're working on the right hand side of the car, and so this screw's facing us. If you're working on the left, you might find that this screw is accessible from the rear, but either way the principle is the same, so we need to get that removed, size 10. So having a quick look at the top mounting here on your sway bar. The rear of it, this is the back of it in the mirror just here, is round, but it does have 2 flat sections to allow you to hold it. One at the top just here, and another one obviously directly opposite on the bottom. Now what you ideally need for this is a special narrow spanner such as this. Unfortunately we don't have the right size. We've got a 19, which is too big, and the 18, which is definitely a little bit too small. So we're assuming obviously this isn't a metric size. But the other thing you can do obviously is clamp this if you don't have the correct narrow spanner. So we'll look at that next. So thankfully we've got these fairly narrow locking pliers here, so just managed to lock that in place. Good idea if yours are very dirty like mine are, just give them a bit of a clean off with the copper brush, because you want to try and get as much kind of dirt out of these threads as possible before obviously the nut comes down. You don't want to be trapping it in there and making it harder for yourself. Whilst I'm here with the copper brush in my hand, we're going to be taking these big bolts out later, so I'm going to give these a bit of a clean up at the same time. So I've got a size 18 socket, and I'm going to put my air gun onto this and slowly give it a couple of spins. Now what you want to do is you want to make sure that the rear of it is not spinning, so this needs to be held still. So you may have to even counter hold that, so we'll see how we go with that. Might swap back to a manual wrench, but that's what you want to do, is just start to crack this nut off, making sure that this doesn't start to turn. Okay, so let's have a quick look at these 2 big bolts that pass through the suspension strut onto the hub. These are 21 on both sides, and obviously what we need to be doing is spinning off the nut. So we've got a size 21 here, put that on the impact gun and start to zip that off. However, very important on these is you'll see when these come out, but on this end, on the bolt head end, they actually have like a little almost like a little serrated edge. It's got little notches in them, and that's to obviously prevent this from actually turning and stuff whilst it's mounted. However, if you put an impact wrench on this and start turning that really hard, there's a chance that that might spin out on that end. So to prevent that, you should counter hold the bolt head end. So to do that, I'm going to get breaker bar. I've got another size 21 there. I'm just going to hold that in place and make sure that that doesn't move, because we don't want this side to spin whilst we're removing the nut from this side. So you can do a quick bit of working out. Obviously we're going to be undoing this, so it's going to be turning in this direction right here. So the potential spin on this bolt is obviously going to be in that same direction as this twist in this direction. Then the bolt head will want to spin in that same direction. So what I've managed to do here, I've managed to get this breaker bar locked in here. If you look just down the back, just down there, you should be able to see I've managed to jam it up against the to move that out so you can see, just in behind the back of the caliper. Be careful of your brake hose, you don't want to damage anything, but obviously this whole thing wants to turn in this direction, so jamming it in there, it's going to make it nice and easy, especially if you're doing this manually. You know, you have to do this with a manual rather than an air gun. It's going to be a lot easier, so if you can find something to jam that up against, it will make the job overall that little bit easier. Okay, so in our case just there, thankfully this counter hold wasn't required, but you should always put that in, because we were lucky that it didn't attempt to spin. It was held in there nice and firmly, but if it wasn't, that could spin out, so don't try and miss that step. You know, like I had just then, you likely won't need it, but the workshop manual tells you to do it, so let's do it. So then, of course, we've just done the top one, now I've got to do exactly the same to the lower one right here. Little quick bit of penetration spray into the little gaps that we've just opened up, top and bottom. So next, grab yourself a lump hammer. We want to give these a bit of a tease and get these knocked out. So just a quick look at these bolts. As I mentioned before, these little serrations, these little grooves, and that's what kind of stops it free spinning whilst it's in situ, and that's why you kind of had to counter hold this, because you don't want to wear these off, scratch them off if it does decide to try and spin, if you get a very stubborn one. And if you get to a point where your bolt's been hammered out as far as it can go, and you've got it's kind of as far as you can hit it in this direction, then what you obviously need to do is get yourself a little pin punch and just finish the bolt off just with the little pin punch in the middle there. So next you want to come under your hood or your bonnet, and you'll be concentrating on the cowl, this plastic cowl section across the end right here. Now if you're doing this as per the Dodge workshop manual, what they tell you to do is actually to remove both of the windscreen wipers. Now if you've had any experience removing windscreen wipers yourself, generally it's you get these little clamp-on tools that you spin on, and they can kind of leave them off. But even with those kind of little specialist tools, if you already have one, they can be a complete pain. If you get a windscreen wiper that's stuck, sometimes they can be a nightmare. So it's a good idea to leave your windscreen wipers alone unless you have to remove them. So what we found is on both sides of this, we'll show it to you in a minute, there's a couple of little plastic clips that we need to get removed, so we'll do that first of all, and once we've done that, we'll show you that you've got plenty of access whilst leaving this in place, so you can actually replace the full strut on both sides of the car without having to get into the headache of starting to remove windscreen wipers and messing around with that side of things. So let's move on. So at the bottom edge of your cowl, you've got these two fixings. There's one in this corner right here, and there's one exactly the same on the opposite corner of the car. So what we're going to do is grab a Phillips size 2. If you start to unscrew these gently without pushing, you'll find the centre will come out. It's like a small plastic screw. And then once the centre section is out, if you kind of reach underneath, sometimes you can push it straight through, yeah, a bit of a wobble. Sometimes what you need to do is reach underneath and just kind of compress these two together to make it flat so you can pull it through, or you can just get your fingernails under the top or a flathead screwdriver, and as you pull it through it will compress naturally. But either way, you need to get those removed on both sides of the car. So we have our clips removed, so let's have a look at how good our access is. This is the right hand side of the car, which is obviously the left hand side as you're looking into the engine bay, the right hand side of the car. And you should find, if we give this a little bit of manipulation, you can lift that up quite a way, and you can see very clearly in there you've got the top of the mount and the screw and the little bolts that hold it in place. So on this side, on the right hand side of the car, you've got plenty of access. You really don't need to be messing around with this. So, but I hear you say, I'm doing the opposite side of the car. Well, let's have a look at that as well. Now on the left hand side of the car here, we do have the windscreen wiper that comes down, passes through the cowl, literally in the corner that we want to be working in. So we know we're not going to have as good access on this side as we did on the other. That said, if you lift this up a little bit, you can see, I can lift that up a good 3 inches plus, and again you can see the 3 little nuts that we need to access on the top of the suspension strut right there as well. So you can see that there is plenty of access to do this job on both sides without the headache of having to remove your wiper arms, and you can just leave this in situ. Just to help us a little bit along the way, so we'll lift this up, a couple of little blocks of scrap wood in, just so that will hold that up to give us that access that we need. So grab yourselves a size 13 socket, and we can start to slacken these off. So once you've removed one, just put it back on. Literally it's a couple of half turns, because what you don't want to do is undo the third one and have that strut fall out of the car. So as you undo each one, just put it back on, 2 little half turns, just to secure the strut in place, stop it falling out. So make sure you've got the strut supported. I'm just going to undo those remaining 2 nuts. The entire strut removed from the vehicle. So we're going to be fitting a brand new complete strut into this vehicle, as opposed to trying to take this apart to replace the spring, which is what's actually broken on this particular one. You can see just on the end there. The reason being, quite simply, is because these struts, especially on the Grand Caravan, because they're quite a common component, they're just so inexpensive. This entire strut is priced at around $120 Canadian, which is about $100 US, which is what, £80, 90 euros, probably not even that much for this, literally this whole thing. And you can be paying a good proportion of that just for the spring itself. And of course, if you are going to try taking these apart, you're going to need a specialist tool to go in the end to allow you to actually you're going to need spring compressors first of all, so you can compress the spring to get it safe, and you're going to need a special tool to be able to release the end of this as well. So if you don't have those, again, this might well be your better option. What we'll do is we'll add some links for you to Amazon.com and Amazon.ca to the cheapest ones of these that you can buy. So scroll down into the descriptive text. Please do click those links and have a look at some of these, and help support us along the way. So just move this out of the box. We've got brand new nuts on the mounting head here. So I just want to get those removed. If the original nuts are the same size, I'll probably reuse those rather than these. But obviously that's not going to be able to fit with those in place, so make sure they're out of the way. So time to fit the new strut. So I'm going to lift it up roughly into place. Remembering our orientation, we need this facing us this way, and then should once you've pushed it up, and get a couple of these nuts on there, just to make sure it's held safely in place. And you can give your arm a quick break, whilst you move around the vehicle and get it back up into a slightly better position to get these tightened up. So you can see we're still loose here, so what we want to do is push that up from underneath and start to get these slowly tightened up. I'm going to make sure it seats nice and evenly as you do so. So you don't want to focus on one. Try and get them all done evenly. Each time you wobble it, you'll get a little bit more out. And just keep going with that until you feel it starting to tighten up. So once you're hand tight, just start to tighten them up. Don't do too much on each one, do a little bit and then keep moving around again. You just want to make sure that this is seated nice and evenly on the top mount across against the chassis just in here. So just keep going round until you get them fairly snug, and then we'll get a torque wrench on them at the end and get them up to the proper factory spec. So the torque for these is 28 Newton meters, which is 21 foot-pounds. So we're happy with our top mounts, so I'm just going to remove my temporary little bits of wood, and we'll get this refitted. When you're refitting, quite a good point of reference, you see we've got this kind of dirt line across the windscreen there. That's kind of where this needs to sit up to. So you know it's kind of in the right place when this line here just disappears like that. Then just pop the little clip through the hole, take the little screw part, push that straight into the centre, and obviously repeat that on the other side. It's a good idea to make these easy to fit together is to get your little wire brush and carefully just to give this a little bit of a wipe over, just to knock off any little bits of crud that built up over the years. And this will make this easier to both slide this in to this gap in the new strut, and also to get the new bolts and get everything snugged up properly. And once you've finished cleaning it up, be sure to give a quick blow through the holes here, just in case any of that dirt has settled into these holes. So now we need to lift this up and get the knuckle slid into the slots here on the new strut. Now grab the nuts, and then we'll just get those started. I'm just grabbing a 21 socket. I'm just going to close this gap up, ready to get this all properly torqued up. Remember not to over tighten this when you're doing this, because we must counter hold the other side. So we've got a torque wrench now. We're going to torque this up to 88 Newton meters, which is 65 foot-pounds. And just a reminder, as we need to counter hold this side. Now obviously we'll be turning it in this direction this time as we tighten it up. When we remove them, obviously we were turning it in that direction. So your counter hold also needs to be reversed, because this is going to want to turn the whole of that bolt in the opposite direction. So what I've done is I've taken my breaker bar to the top here, and I'm just leaning it against the top of the brake disc just here as a counter hold. Okay, and once you've got up to the correct torque specification on these nuts, you've also got to add a 90-degree turn. So what you want to do is get your wrench into position, and then literally you're turning it through 90 degrees. So you'd be going from either 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock, or from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, or 6 to 9, etc. But that's all you want to do, is get yourself set up in a position as level as you can, and then turn that through exactly 90 degrees. Remembering, obviously, you still need to counter hold the other side. So next up, we need to reconnect our sway bar into our nut, feed that through, and just start off by hand tightening that, remembering that you're going to be using your counter hold, be that the grip pliers that we're using, or a special thin spanner. That's as tight as I'll go by hand. So next what I want to do is get my socket on there and just start to slowly wind that back, again ensuring that I counter hold here, and then what we'll do at the end is exactly the same as before. We need to get this to the proper spec on the torque wrench. So grab your torque wrench again, and exactly the same as before, this is going to 88 Newton meters, which is 65 foot-pounds. So next up, grab your little bracket for the wheel speed sensor, slide that over, and we want to get our little screw back in here. Then just tighten this up so it's nice and snug, definitely not going to fall out. Technically it should be 10 Newton meters, but it's not really worth measuring. Just make sure it's nice and snug. Job done. So that's how to replace the complete strut on your Dodge Grand Caravan. A couple of things to bear in mind. Obviously you're going to put the wheel back on now. Be sure to torque those wheel nuts up to the correct specification, and also be sure to take this car for a quick road test, just kind of around your driveway, just around the block, something like that, before you consider it job done, just to make sure that you're happy with it and everything feels as it should. One other thing to point out as well, whenever you're doing any work on any suspension components in your vehicle, you're going to find that there's going to be a wheel alignment difference to how it was before. Obviously this particular vehicle had a broken spring, so that whole thing would have been sitting a little bit low on this side. So what you'll find is when we drive this car now, the wheel alignment will be slightly different. And it is possible, once you've replaced suspension components, it could be the strut, the arms, whatever it might be, that you'll find that the car drifts slightly to one side or the other. And you might find that it was doing that before when you had the suspension issue, and now that you replace this, it might well straighten back up as you get nearer to the kind of factory position. But it's always worth bearing in mind, any work you do on your suspension, a wheel alignment may be required afterwards, so you're going to have to budget for the wheel alignment as well. It's just one of those unfortunate things when you are working on your suspension. But do go out, give it a road test. You might find that drift that you had before, if you had a broken spring or something like that, is now kind of straightened itself back up, and you can get away with not doing the wheel alignment, but we'll leave that completely at your own discretion. But be sure to drive safe and to test this before you take it on the highway. Thanks for watching, guys, really appreciate it. As ever, can you do us a quick favour before you leave us? At least hit that like button for us. If you could also hit that subscribe, that's really, really helpful for us, and we really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, guys. See you again.